Hey everybody. Hopefully you can hear and see me. I'm Megan Gore. I don't know if you remember me from the first meeting, but I'm filling in for Jessica today. We have a great presentation for you. Barb Houseworth is here, and she's going to be talking about internships and talking about apprenticeships and learning more about how those experiences can help you in the fields that you're going into. So I'm going to have you mute your mic for now, and if you have any questions, you can type them into the chat box, or she may ask you to kind of chime in, and then you can open up your mics for those times. And then when she's done, she'll pass it back over to me, and I'll go over the next assignments that you have coming up that are due by tonight and on Sunday, and we can go over any questions that you may have. So we will get started right now. Thanks. All righty. Oh, and I will turn off the camera. Thank you. So you can't see it. All right, thanks. But you can leave that there for the chat.
Yes, a chance. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today, and I'm really excited about talking to you about one of my favorite topics, which is experiential learning. And so it's a mouthful. We'll talk a little bit about what is included in experiential learning, why it's so important, and I really firmly believe that every single person should have some type of experiential learning opportunity before they finish their program here at Washtenaw, or just in general in life. Couple things that would really help me out, and if you can participate, the more participation I have, the easier it is for me to get some feedback on what we should cover in terms of topics. So the first thing I'd like to know is if you have an idea about what career path you might want to go on, if you can just type that in your chat box and let me know, or what major you are, then I have a good idea of who I'm working with, and we can talk about some specifics. Thanks. I've got nursing. If there's anybody else online, please just type in what you think, or just in general, if you don't know exactly what you want to do. Addiction counseling, I assume. Yep. Great. Another nurse. Okay, good. We've got a lot of good healthcare representation. Okay, so good. That helps me out kind of to tailor this presentation and talk a little bit more about how you specifically in your fields will be able to tackle experiential learning. So let's talk a little bit about what is experiential learning. Like I said, it's a bit of a mouthful. So there's lots of different ways that we define experiential learning. So really at experiential learning, if you break it down in terms of what it means means basically getting experience in the career field or in the area that you're studying that directly relates and is engaging. So a lot of times people have the misperception that sometimes internships or co-ops, and we'll talk about the difference between those, or some of the other experiential learning opportunities, it just gives you an exposure to an office or a healthcare setting if it's a healthcare. And really it should be more. I think in the olden days, maybe even when I went to school a little bit, people would oftentimes have internships, and it was kind of a glorified administrative assistant position. That really has changed quite a bit, although even back then they were having some really great experiences. And we'll also talk about why it will be so important for you to have those experiences that directly relate to your field. So let's talk about all the different things that experiential learning is often called. So you've probably all heard of internships, although we'll go into a little more detailed definitions about what is an internship. Clinicals for those two individuals who mentioned that they're in nursing, that is going to be a big part of your experience as you're going through the nursing program, is going into clinicals and having hands-on opportunity to work with patients and work in the healthcare system. There are also things called co-ops, and so I'm curious, does anybody know, if you do know, the difference between an internship and a co-op? Type that into your box. I'd like to hear what your thoughts are about what the difference is. Sometimes internships can also be referred to externships. There is a slight difference, but those words, I'll be honest with you, in the industry are often used interchangeably and not necessarily correctly, but it's basically, again, leaving the environment of an educational institution and going out into the field and getting some hands-on experience. We also mentioned apprenticeships. Now this is actually changing recently. This used to be primarily designated for our trades. So people like our plumbers, electricians, construction people who had to learn a lot of information about the industry would actually go into an apprentice program, which is actually a longer program than a typical internship or co-op. Typically, they would go in for a few years and study with a master apprentice who would show them the ropes. Now, actually, we're finding that even careers like IT are starting to establish apprenticeships. The healthcare field has been reaching out to us quite a bit lately to say, you know what, we need some people who have more than just a couple months of exposure to our field to get some more in-depth knowledge. So that's really expanded to where it used to traditionally only incorporate the trades, and so we're seeing it in more and more fields. Field research, so some of you will be going more into the research side or will be required to do some research in your programs. We see this a lot in the science areas, obviously. And that too is a great experience to actually go hands-on and work on those research projects out in the field. Anybody gonna take me up on my offer to tell me what the difference between an internship and co-op is? Feel free to type. I won't knock anyone for any answer, so feel free. And I'd like to see sometimes too if there's some misperceptions about what the differences are. So feel free to, if you're not sure, that's fine. I appreciate you being honest, and we'll talk about that. Job shadowing is a great way also. I'll give you an example. I had a young lady who was interested in the veterinary program, or thought she wanted to be a vet, and she went and job shadowed her vet for a day, and then quickly learned that she probably couldn't handle the blood and some of the other procedures that a vet does on a regular basis. But it was a great way for her to figure out pretty quickly that maybe I still want to work with animals, but just not in a veterinary mode. So practicums, a lot of times practicums as well as student teaching, again, will be integrated words. Like if you're in the education field, you will definitely have to be required to do student teaching, and that's their way of exposing you into the classroom. And then there's just some independent studies that some programs here at WCC and colleges across the country will allow you to do in order to get experiential learning. So I don't see anyone who says I know what the difference is between an internship and co-op, and that's why I always bring it up. Just because you may have an option in your program to do one of those things. So everyone can do an internship if they so desire to do so. Typically an internship runs between 3 and 4 months. It used to be that almost all the internships that were available were primarily available in the summer, and part of that reason was that traditional college students who were going to four-year universities were free and available 40 hours a work week during the summer. Now there still is more internships available typically in the summer, but many, many companies have realized that I can get students all through the academic year, usually on a part-time basis in the academic year, during the academic year to work, and then full-time usually in the summer. Now everything's a little different. Some people do a combination. I have one company who does year-round internships, but they do full-time only. So even during the academic year, you'd almost have to take a semester off or maybe take a night class or an online class in order to participate in their internship. Mostly they're paid unless you are in a nonprofit. So if you're in one of the traditional fields, I would say $10 to $15 an hour is typical internship pay. And it's just, again, a way to really learn some more about your trade or your craft. Now, the big difference between co-ops, all those things really typically also exist that I mentioned in an internship and a co-op. Here's the real big caveat or difference between the two, and particularly as it pertains to how Washtenaw Community College looks at a co-op. So a co-op, you can get experience, you can work part-time, full-time, you can earn pay or not. But in addition to all those things, you also can earn college credit. So this is a very nice caveat if you're trying to get a couple additional credits for your program. Not all programs allow you to do co-ops, so you do have to check with each one of your individual departments. And again, because healthcare typically has clinicals built into them, they don't normally offer co-ops. But if you are not in one of those areas or not sure if you have co-ops available to you, you can either reach out to me or reach out to the person who's in charge of your department at Washtenaw Community College and ask them about a co-op option. How it works basically is it depends on how many hours you work during that semester. It should coincide close to semester starting and semester ending. There is some information that employers will have to provide back to the professor, who will be monitoring your progress there and making sure you're getting something very tangible out of that experience. You will have check-in points like at midterm and at the end to write about your experience and make sure you've covered all the things that the employer also wanted you to get out of that experience. For every 120 hours that you put in, you can get 1 credit, up to a maximum of 3 credits in a semester. So if you're working full-time, you probably could get 3 credits in a semester. If you're working part-time, it's a little more difficult to get all 3 credits. So just want to make sure you're aware of that, because a lot of times, again, students are thinking about maybe they need to take a few more credits in order to get the maximum amount of credits they need to get their associate's degree or certificate programs. And rather than just taking a random elective, they can actually take related fields and get some experience and credit for that experience. If a lot of people come to me too, who are especially who have just been here 1 semester or their first year, and say, gosh, I'm not quite ready, or I don't feel like I'm ready for internships, which I will tell you that that's not usually always the case, but we can talk about the timing of that. But I'd like to get an idea of volunteering in the field. I'd like to understand a little bit more about what I can do and make some connections. And so we can also, at the Career Services Office, which is actually now Career Transitions is our new name here at WCC, we can assist you in finding those opportunities or talking to you about where to find those opportunities if you're interested. So for example, I'll tell you a lot, especially with those students who are in healthcare, I've had a lot of students in healthcare come to me and say, you know what, I was thinking about usually nursing, to be honest, but I'm not even really sure what else in healthcare I could really do. So can you point me to some opportunities where I might be able to job shadow someone in surge tech or someone who's in healthcare administration? Because before I get too far into my program, I want to make sure that this is the right experience for me. So let's talk about the main reasons why you might want to pursue an experiential learning opportunity, and there are several. So again, if you can just type in your chat box, why do you think this would be important for you to have in your program, an experiential learning opportunity? And then we'll talk about each one of those things, as well as maybe some additional ideas that I have for you. So give me an idea of why you think this might be valuable to you to either have a clinical, an internship, a co-op experience, or even a volunteer experience that will give you some insight into the field. So you get more experience and knowledge, said Amy. Absolutely. And Kayla, I think it's Kayla, also said you can get more experience. So one of the biggest reasons is employers now, and I can tell you because I've gone to both sides of the fence. I've worked in education, but I also was a recruiter for about 7 years of my life. And I primarily recruited on college campuses throughout the state of Michigan. So I covered that on 28, I think, campuses when I last looked. But college recruiters are really looking for students to have some experience before they even get out of the programs. Well, how do you get that experience? You know, you're thinking about your first job probably after college. Employers are now saying this is the new norm. We expect students to have some base knowledge of their industry and to have some actual hands-on experience. So again, experiential learning opportunities are perfect opportunities because when employers are hiring someone for an internship, co-op, or clinical, they know that you're a student. They don't expect you to know everything, unlike maybe what they expect in a full-time role after you graduate. So not that they expect you to know everything, but they expect you to know quite a bit. So they know it's going to be a training opportunity, and you're more apt to get a lot more mentoring and assistance as you're going through an experiential learning opportunity. The other one, I think Kayla also mentioned, is to get better known. This is a tremendous opportunity for you to network. The number one way, and I think that people are unaware of this, that people still find jobs is networking. It is not through Indeed. It is not online searching. even though we have all those great, wonderful resources available to us, and I don't diminish that there's a need for you to do it that way. I think you need to do that in conjunction with networking. But what I oftentimes hear from students is, how do I network when I really don't know anybody in the field? Or maybe I only know 1 or 2 people in the field, and they're not in the area that I want to specifically go into that industry. So experiential learning opportunities, even if it doesn't turn into a full-time job at that point, could open a lot of doors in terms of people in the industry who would be willing to talk to you about other opportunities, either at the company or maybe even outside that company. So it's a great way to get, as you mentioned, get better known or network. One of the things that I see quite often in my office is a lot of students come to me and, again, may not think they're ready for experiential learning because they don't have confidence in what they're doing. They're like, I only took 1 class, or maybe they haven't even taken a class within their industry or their major yet. They've only taken gen ed classes, and I don't really think I have some skills yet to be able to offer to an employer. Well, that being said, how do you gain confidence? How do you increase your skills? Again, that's what an experiential learning opportunity is designed for. To gain that confidence, you have to have that exposure. And quite honestly, probably the lack of confidence is the #1 reason that our students don't pursue experiential learning or don't feel real confident when they go out to look for their first full-time job. And they tend to diminish their skill sets and their ability to get a wide range of opportunities. So this is a wonderful way, when you actually do the work, you're going to be immediately understanding the skill development and the skills that are going to be necessary in your field, and you'll automatically, hopefully, gain confidence in your skills that you've learned through an experiential learning opportunity. Oops. Also, marketability. As I mentioned earlier, employers want to see more relevant work experience in college grads. When I recruited, which was about 10 years ago or so, it was pretty common. In fact, it was pretty uncommon not to see people who didn't have any experiential learning. Now, what I'm hearing from recruiters is many of them are seeing and almost expecting at least 2 experiences before you graduate, which is a good thing for you too, because you also want to explore different experiences, in my opinion, before you actually make a full-time commitment to that position or that industry. This actually is a little outdated, and now it's close to almost 70% of students we're finding across the country now do at least 1 internship. This was about 2 years ago, and I haven't quite updated it, but it's about 68% now. And again, employers said, 95% of our employers that were surveyed said candidates' experience is a major factor in hiring. So how do they base what you know, or how good of an employee you're going to be, if they have no skill set for you to have a foundation to test your knowledge? Also, I mentioned earlier, most of the opportunities are paid. This is actually kind of a new development, probably within the last 10 years or so. The IRS, it used to be, like when I went to school, actually, many moons ago, you could not get an experience that was paid. My college would not allow me to gain income as well as get the experience when I did my internship. What the IRS was finding is that a lot of people were working, doing work that they should have been collecting taxes on. So they kind of made those things a little bit harder to do. And so if you are a for-profit company, most likely you're going to be paid for your work, which is great, because a lot of college students do a lot of traditional types of work, and maybe it's, retail or restaurant work. And if you can get experience and get paid, more bonus to you. And I know a lot of our students are working students and need that income to come in. And here's one statistic I think will really get your attention. So I'm a recruiter, and I have 2 candidates who I'm going to hire. And I want you guys to do so nursing internships get paid. So nursing students, thank you for the question. Let me address that before I go a little further. Typically do clinicals. Clinicals are not paid because they're actually a part of your program development. it's an integral part of nursing. So typically, no. Now, do some healthcare systems have separate internships outside of your nursing clinicals? Yes. So if you do find an internship separate, they're usually not nursing internships. They're usually internships that go further or different route than nursing, but they are in the healthcare field. So thanks for asking that question. You're a little bit of the exception just because clinicals are not deemed as internships. In terms of hiring salaries, I want you to give some thought to this, and I want you to give me some feedback. I have two candidates before me. One has had an internship experience and one has not. I like both of these candidates. I decide I'm actually going to hire both of these candidates. Based on statistics done over it was about a 10-year study, and I think they surveyed almost 20,000 students across the country to see what their starting potentials were. So let me give you a scenario, and I want you to give me some good ideas about what you think a person who has an internship experience might get in terms of a difference of salary. And I'm going to tell you, obviously, there is a difference. Don't guess astronomically, but because employers, again, put a value to your skill set, right? So if you have more skills and you've done some experiential learning, you're going to probably be more valuable to most employers. But if I offer the person who did not have an internship experience $40,000 a year, that's what I'm offering the person who did not get the intern or did not have an internship experience. What do I traditionally, 40,000? What would I traditionally offer someone we've already agreed would be a little higher? What would be your guess at what I might offer as a starting salary? And this is across all majors. This is the average. And so I want you to guess what you think in a yearly salary there might be in terms of difference between 40,000 and the student who does have an internship experience, which we're going to offer more than 40. Any guesses out there? 55, Kayla, okay, good, thanks. Any other thoughts? It's your time to place your wagers. Now remember, an average internship or co-op experience, okay, also 45. An average experience is typically 3 to 4 months, right? So you've got skill developments for about a semester difference, although they are usually full-time opportunities, so you have 40 hours times a traditional length of a semester, 12 or 15 weeks, depending on what semester you're in. Any other guesses before I reveal the actual answer? We've got 55, we've got 45, we've got 60. The actual difference is about $8,000. So if I were to hire someone at 40,000 who does not have an internship or co-op experience, the person who did have that experience would get about 8,000 more. IT is actually quite a bit more, but this is again across all majors. Now I wanted you to think about this because I know some of you guessed a little higher and maybe that's a little disappointing to you. 3 to 4 months of your time, $8,000 difference. I can tell you in all the years that I've been working, to get a difference of $8,000 in 1 year from someone who's been hired versus someone who another candidate's hired is pretty impossible. Like I would never get an $8,000 raise in the majority of people in 1 year. So you are already starting at a substantial typical higher starting salary. What I also want you to think about is the factoring of this over several years, right? So if I start out at 40,000 and the candidate who had an internship or experiential learning opportunity starts out at 48, and next year my company gives me the same standard raise, and just for easy math, we'll say 10%, which is a little high, to be honest, for most people. But now, me starting at 40,000, I've got a 10% raise the next year too, and now I'm making 44,000. But the person who started out at $48,000 a year also gets the same proportionate raise, but it's on a base of 48,000. So you see what's happening every year. That gap is getting wider and wider because she now got 4,800 where I only got 4,000. And every year it's based on that initial starting salary if you stay at the same company, or even if you move companies, because oftentimes they will base your salary and experience based on where you left off at the last company. So this is a really huge thing to consider. Your skills they equate to usually value, and value usually means more money. If a student wants to do clinicals and internships, what should they do first? Oh, that's a good question. Okay, so let me just, Surg Tech. Somebody's typed in Surg Tech ? I don't know what you want me to ask about Surg Tech. Oh, if they have internships? Yes, actually, we talked to St. Joe's, if that's what you're asking. And they are now, because Surg Tech is a relatively, thank you, yes, relatively new area, but Surg Tech, sterile processing, they're starting to offer some of those opportunities. St. Joe's, Michigan Medicine have both talked to us about offering some opportunities for students in those areas. So if you want to do a clinical or an internship, your clinicals will be handled by the academic people in your program. So that will be automatically rolled in, Kayla, if you're going to do a clinical, for example, in nursing. If you want to explore other internships in your field or other fields, my suggestion, and this will be also at the end of my presentation, I'll give you all my information, is come see me first. At the very least, we can start to narrow down what you're looking for, how you should go about it. For the majority of people, you're going to need a resume, and while you may or may not have a resume at this point, I think this class actually does some resume development. It's always good for someone else in our career services office to take a look at that, as particularly with certain employers, we know oftentimes what kinds of key things that they're looking for. And finally, I think, and probably one of the biggest reasons you might want to come see us, is you can all look for internships out on the web. You can go to Indeed.com, you can look out there. My suggestion is you should do that in conjunction with meeting with us, and here's why. On average, a lot of people know about Indeed. It's a great resource. It probably posts most of the more positions in that single spot than any other place on the web. The downside of Indeed is, you have no contact information to follow up. So once you submit your resume, or once you submit an inquiry about it, or submit an application, depending on what they're asking for, there's nothing you can do but sit back and wait and hope they call you. The other thing that's kind of the downside of Indeed, and this is not to discourage you from using Indeed, I just want you to be aware of why we suggest you do other things than just look on Indeed, is that Indeed, a lot of people know about it, so it's a very competitive resource. So on average, when I was recruiting, it would not be uncommon for me to have one position available and over 100 applicants applied on Indeed. That is not great. That is not your great odds, right? So that's about 1%. So that's, or less if it's more than 100 applicants. It's a little bit different job market now, and probably not that as many people apply, I will say, in this day and age, but it still is very competitive, as opposed to some of the contacts that we have through career services, which you may or may not be aware of, who we network with, who we have relationships with, just by looking on Indeed or looking on the web, and we can help direct you in the right area. So thanks for that question about what you should do first. And again, you can start looking on Google or Indeed, but I do really, not just to toot our own horn, but I really do think all of you should come in and see the Career Transitions office and meet with one of our staff members. You also mentioned experience, but here's something that I want you to consider about an experiential learning opportunity. How do you really know what you're going to do? And we were just talking a few minutes ago about how I chose my major, or what was my first job. And to be quite honest, my experience in terms of the amount of careers and knowledge I had about different careers out there was very limited. In general, most people's are. You may have a friend or a family member who's doing something. Maybe you saw something on TV or heard about a cool career that you wanted to explore. There are literally thousands of careers, and those careers are changing every day. Careers that didn't even exist 10 years ago. Sterile processing in the healthcare industry, autonomous vehicle, which is one of the internships that we have with the Michigan University of Michigan's Transportation Research Institute. They're doing some really cool testing. So we had 6 of our students do this in the last year, testing all these autonomous vehicles and going through some of the simulation tests that they're doing for autonomous vehicles or driverless cars. It was pretty cool, some neat things. So there's so much out there. I won't pretend to say that I know all about all the different careers because it's limitless almost. But I will tell you that sometimes you don't even know what area you might want to go into because you don't know it exists. So one thing I can say really indefinitely, and I'll give you a personal example. When I was in college, you need to explore your career well before you graduate. And here's my own personal example. So when I was in college, I did do my first internship between my junior and senior year. It was in my dream field. It was a 500 company, very respected. If I told you, everyone who I would say their name would recognize it. It was exactly doing what I thought I was wanting to do as a full-time career after I graduated. So excited to get this job. Well, when I did it that summer, I didn't dislike it, but I didn't love it either. And I thought, this isn't very good. It's my first exposure. I've gone out to my career and now I'm not loving it. And this is my first job. I should be loving it. So I got really nervous. I went back to school my senior year, my fall semester, my senior year, and I'm thinking, do I change job or change majors? Am I gonna lose some credits because I've got to go in a different direction? If I do go in a different direction, I had no idea what other direction I was gonna go in. It was a very scary place to be because this was my dream job, or so I thought. Well, something happened that fall, totally by coincidence, and I was lucky it did, but I had another opportunity come in that specifically was very similar to the job that I had done this summer, which I was surprised I was even interested in it, to be honest. But it was in the education field as opposed to private industry. And I ended up taking on that internship, partly because I also just wanted to network and meet some more people too, and it sounded like a kind of a cool project. And I loved it. So what I'm telling you is that sometimes it's not always about the career field. Sometimes it's about the environment. In this case, I loved working in the education field. Obviously, I'm still back in education. And had I not had that second exposure, I might have changed my major, or who knows what I might have done. But you know, you've got to test drive the career. You've got to test drive different companies. You've got to test drive the people you work with. I think we've all been in situations where we might have worked with someone who could make or break the experience for us, you know, bosses, coworkers. And so it's a great time for you to spend just a few months really learning about that business or that opportunity with really no downside. Because at the end of the 3 or 4 months, if you decide you don't want to do it anymore, that's all it was intended to be, was an exposure, and you can walk away. You have more experience on your resume, and no one's going to think badly of it. In the best case scenario, oftentimes they may offer you a full-time job, and it confirms that you're actually working in the right industry or the right field. So all plus sizes, all plus, not sizes, all plus pluses to doing an opportunity. As opposed to, I just want you to think about this, if you were working full-time, you went into an experience and 3 or 4 months down the line, you decided, yikes, this isn't for me, I need to switch jobs. Most recruiters and most hiring managers are not really happy to find a candidate who's stayed less than a year at any company. So that doesn't really bode well for you. So might as well take advantage of something that's set up to only be 3 or 4 months initially. And some are longer than that. I'm just telling you on average. Some can actually, we have what are called rolling internships. So I had one student who started almost the first semester here at Washtenaw, and they liked him so much that they wanted to keep him on board until he actually graduated. So he did an internship for almost 2 years exactly. And then when he graduated from his program here, they offered him a full-time position. So that happens too, but usually they're 3 to 4 months. Then there's this big caveat. 60%, it's actually like 62% of paid internships right now are being turned into full-time job offers when you graduate or finish your program. That may, for some people, be like, oh, that's kind of disappointing. I thought it'd be higher than that. I think it's a pretty high statistic. And then again, I want you to think about what I said earlier in terms of how many candidates I would select if you applied on Indeed. 1% if you have, 100 candidates, 2% if I even have 50 candidates apply. So 60% sounds like a much better statistic than 1 or 2% if I'm just going through a traditional way of looking for a job, or looking on the internet, I should say. And then somebody mentioned a way to get yourself out there, networking. You will all probably need some professional references. Most hiring companies, especially larger companies, are going to want to check your professional references. It's a great way to obtain those professional references because they have a real good sense of how you worked and what you did. Here's the other thing I really want you to think about as a student. So experiential learning is great for your resume. It's great to get job opportunities. It's great for networking. What people don't often think about or talk about is how great it is for your learning experience. And this is here at WCC or any learning institution. And this is why experiential learning is so important, and why I encourage you all to consider it early on in your educational path. They've done lots of studies about retention. Long-term retention, if I'm just talking to you like here today, in general, if you're listening to me, just listening to what I have to say, there's no hands-on interaction, you're not actively engaged in the work that we're doing, about 5% of what I say you're going to retain. It's kind of disappointing to me as someone who is a presenter. But long-term, 5% is the average of what you actually retain, which is why in the educational areas, you'll see professors or teachers say the same things over and over and over and over again, right? Because we want you to remember that, because we know retention is very low. As opposed to actually doing hands-on based experiential learning opportunities, direct experience, that long-term retention jumps incredibly, to me, to almost 75% retention. That is why a lot of people who go out to an internship site may come back to me and say, you know what, things are just clicking for me better at school. Well, yeah, if you remember 75 compared to 5%, you are going to be a better student, right? And they also, it's a great way for you and to understand things that are being discussed kind of in theory here in the classrooms. As much as we try to model them closely to the real world, they're really in theory, and then seeing them in practice in the real world makes it a lot easier to understand a lot of the concepts. So again, I say to people, do you want to be a better student when you're walking out the door, or do you want to be a better student the first year that you're here, the first semester that you start to take classes in any college experience? I think that's an obvious answer, but I would want you to really be the best student you could be by getting that experiential learning early on, so you can actually apply it to the things we're teaching you here in classes. So it's just a really great way to augment some of the things that are being taught in the class. Sometimes I'm told I'm not pursuing an internship or co-op or, again, any kind of experiential learning outside of volunteering because of these reasons. And I just want to make sure that you understand these are very common myths, but don't let these stop you from pursuing those opportunities. Again, we already talked about that a lot of people believe that most internships are unpaid. I have students all the time saying to me, I can't do an unpaid exchange. I have to pay for my books or my tuition or bills, right? Again, most of the time that is not the case with for-profit agencies. Another thing that I oftentimes hear, and this is true with some employers, but not necessarily all the employers we work with for sure, that I can't take on an internship or experiential learning opportunity until I'm a junior or senior in college, until I've transferred to a four-year institution. I work with students all day long that are all in community college atmosphere. I have employers who literally have said to me, you can have a student start day one at WCC, and day two, I will take them on an internship. So don't let that stop you from pursuing an internship, or saying, oftentimes students will say, well, I haven't even, again, taken any classes, or I don't have any base or knowledge in that field because I've only been taking math and science and and English classes, but nothing in my major. Some employers are going to require you to go a little further in your program, others are not. So come to us and we'll talk to you about which ones are best suited for you. Other people believe, well, I can't get an internship or co-op because I don't have any experience in the field. Well, that's exactly what an internship or co-op is designed for, so no one really expects that. And then finally, I can't do an internship because it only takes place in the summer, and for whatever reason, I can't do it in the summer. Again, we already addressed this a little earlier, but that has still, there are probably more opportunities in the summer, but that has really changed. I'd like to kind of give you some ideas of, and again, some of these aren't necessarily in your field, but we can talk about some ones that are in your field that I think are also cool. So Google, this is just some different ways of thinking about experiential learning. So Google has their own traditional intern program, and if you saw the internship or the intern, both of them were somewhat based on Google's internship program, but they also have another program similar to, you know, medical residency programs that's designed for students as they are finishing their last semester at school, and they have 2 years after that. They're basically committing you for 2 years after you graduate. And what it does is they expose you to all different aspects of Google's operations. So they take you all over, not only the country, but all over the world, learning about how Google operates and seeing all the different departments, and you get a full exposure to those areas to kind of figure out what might be the best fit for you within Google. You actually spend 2 weeks in Australia, I know for a fact. So for those of you who are really adventuresome and would like to see lots of different parts of the country and the world, it's a great program to explore. And Google has positions outside of just what you think is traditional IT. They have customer service positions, they have marketing positions, they have sales, you name it, they probably HR positions. So this is a great program for a lot of different majors. Here's one, if you're in the science fields or technology fields, I would encourage all of you to look at this. And we had several students who actually applied for this. It's called the SMART Scholarship Program. It's a combination scholarship and internship. And this is why the program, I always talk about this program because it's so robust. It will allow you, and the scholarship, you do have to apply, and there's an application process, and here's the website where you would apply, and it usually comes up around August when you can start applying, and usually the cutoff, I think, is November or December. You'll have to look on the website to see if you're eligible. And so they do look at your grades, they look at your needs, they look at what kind of programs you're studying, but it's put on by the federal government. It's for people who are in STEM majors, so science, technology, engineering, or math. If any of those fall under your major, you're eligible to apply for this. It is 100% tuition reimbursement, 100% book allowance, medical insurance if you need it, plus you get paid for your internship that you will do in the summer as part of this program. And typically that pay is around $20,000 for summer. That's a lot of money. So even if you're transferring, so say you get in as a sophomore here at WCC, you become a SMART Scholar, so they'll pay for your tuition here at WCC, your book allowance, and if you need medical insurance. And then you transfer to the University of Michigan, and now they're paying for all your tuition at the University of Michigan, your book allowance, junior year, senior year, and then you're getting those stipends for your summer internship. Tremendous amount of money, tremendous amount of opportunities, because you actually get to work in the federal government's labs and hands-on stuff that's really cool and classified, and it's a pretty cool program. So you can, there actually is videos if you're interested in finding out more about that. And for those in the healthcare field, this is really a cool thing to explore and look into. General Motors, we always, every year for the last 4 years, since really almost the year that I started, General Motors has taken a group of students over at the Proving Grounds as well as at the Warren Tech Center, and they're working on all kinds of, they're doing crash test dummy testing, they're doing autonomous vehicle testing, they're doing all hands-on. The cool thing about General Motors is if you're an intern and they want to keep you, or they're interested in offering you a position potentially when you graduate, every single one of our students who've been doing this in the last 4 years has been offered a full-time job at General Motors, which is a very difficult company to get into, contingent upon they finishing their program here. That's pretty cool. And they offer you tuition reimbursement if you want to continue after WCC day one at General Motors. So it's a great program. The other one that I was going to mention that I didn't put on here, especially for those of you who might be interested in healthcare, this is a good example of somebody who came to my office. He was a first semester student who was interested in sports conditioning and medicine. And when I spoke with a student, I always like to find out, so what's your long-term aspirations? If you had a perfect job of, magic lamp and you could rub it and the genie came out and granted you your wish, what would that ideal job look like? And for a lot of people, you don't know yet, but this gentleman knew very clearly. He said, well, ideally, I would like to work with Olympic athletes. That'd be a really cool, perfect job, helping them condition and train for the Olympics. I said, that's a great job. And to be honest, I was a little taken back because I'm thinking, I don't know a lot of Olympic athletes that I can connect you with. But needless to say, we did some exploring to find out what kinds of sports conditioning and medicine internships were available to someone who was first semester student here. So we found that the University of Michigan, right down the street, actually has a program for their interns just like that. And there's an application process. So while the student was in my office, we called up the University of Michigan and I said, can you tell me some more information that would help my student get this potential internship? And he did. He told us, he needs to go get certified, he gets CPR certified, he needs to do a job shadow. Lo and behold, this student obtained this internship. And here's the real kicker. So this program is not only working with student athletes at the University of Michigan, they're actually working with the athletes that are specifically training for the Olympics. So here was his dream job. I didn't even know it existed, but it was really cool. So I can't pretend I'll do that every time that I meet with you, but we do have some really great connections. If you're looking, somebody asked earlier, what should I do first or where should I start looking? Here's some other sites besides Indeed, although I do really like Indeed sites for an amount of opportunities out there. Intern in Michigan, not all, but I'll be honest with you, they now changed a little bit, but a lot of internship positions, you can take down this contact link, Intern in Michigan, just Google it in and it'll take you out to there. Career Builder, Monster, Pure Michigan Talent are other places where you can find. And then we also have our own internal job board at WCC called Career Connection. And again, if you need someone to walk you through that, or you can just type in Career Connection from the WCC website, you'll see all kinds of jobs on the Career Connection board, as well as contacts for some employers we work with. So in addition to internships and experiential learning, which is what all I do, so if you're interested in any of those opportunities, you come see me. Our team can also help you, including myself, with resume, cover letter writing, mock interviewing. Most people don't practice that very often. You need lots of practice to be good at anything you do, and then making those connections. So my next step, I think Kayla asked me, what should I do next? Again, I would encourage you to make an appointment with our team. We're going to help you if you haven't developed your resume, but it sounds like most of you in this class have done that. We'll help you with job searching and then practicing interviewing. Co-ops is a little more complex, but I can help you walk you through these steps. And here's my contact information. So either reach out to me via email or you can call the main career transitions office, which is probably the easiest way to make an appointment with me. Then they can check my schedule and availability against yours, and then we can connect and then hopefully get you on your way for looking for a new career or a new opportunity. Any other questions before I turn it back over? If you have anything that I can answer for you while I'm here, I'll be glad to do that. If not, feel free, or if something comes up after our time here, feel free to make an appointment and ask questions or email me. I'm always available for questions. So let me just scroll down here, make sure I'm not getting any other questions before I turn it back over. Oops, let's see. I have a question I'm not sure is relevant. I'm considering taking a break next semester so I can get a better job. Is that okay, or should I take classes? Well, I think everybody's situation is different. I can't advise you whether it's best to take classes or not take classes. I think my only piece of advice to you would be, regardless of whether you take classes or don't take classes, don't keep yourself out of the loop. So if you're not taking any classes, this would be a good time for you to explore experiential learning and then come back to classes. If you do decide to take classes, you can also do an experiential learning opportunity at the same time. I hope that answers your question. I'm not sure if that's what you're asking me. If you have some more questions specifically about academic classes, I would also encourage you to get in touch with our career counseling office, which is different than what we do at Career Transitions. Career counseling can help you with not only your academic classes and your pathway here, but they also can help you do assessment tests that may help you decide what kind of path you might want to take as a career. So hopefully that answers your question. If not, get back to me. I'm going to turn it over now. Thank you so much for your attention. I hope I get an opportunity to meet most of you who had a chance to listen in.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All righty. Thanks to Barb for all that great information. And if you have any further questions for her, feel free to email her, or you can email Jessica and she can forward that on. But just real quickly, I wanted to go over the last few things about what is due this evening and for Sunday. So let me turn this up here. Okay, so by this evening, if you're watching this video, you have to complete the alternate video assignment and email those questions to both your instructor, Jessica, and to Barb. You also need to complete Journal 3, complete the time management planning for Unit 4. That is due this evening. And then by this coming Sunday at 11:59 p.m., you want to make sure that you complete the WCC degree certificate worksheet and the degree audit using DegreeWorks. So also something to note is that your interview should be scheduled by this point. So if you have any questions about that, you'll want to get into contact with Jessica. So at this time, do you have any questions about those assignments that are coming up or anything else that was covered today? If you have a question, feel free to type it in the chat, or you can just type an N there for no, so that I know you don't have any questions. All right, I got, yes, if you attend the meeting, the video synchronous meeting right now, if you are on here, you do not need to complete the alternate assignment. That is correct. Anyone else? Any other questions? Alrighty, it doesn't look like there are any other questions, so have a fabulous day and join in next week. Take care.